Nope.
Okay, welcome.
Thank
So
you.
this is it's the last class before Shavuos. So we're gonna continue talking about the halachos of bein adam l'chaveiro, how one interacts with their fellow. There are many, many more to do. But we'll have to think of a different topic after Shavuos, because we learned this in preparation for receiving the Torah. So we'll continue with that. So where we last left off, I think the last thing we spoke about was the that you have a mitzvah sometimes to actually rebuke people if they think that if you think that they'll actually listen to you. Um, so this might be review. I can't remember if we did this or not, but we're going to talk about the prohibition on chanufa. Um, this is something the Gemara talks about. The Gemara actually says. I think in Gittin, the Gemara says that the base of Mikdash was destroyed because of Chanufa. So what does it mean, Chanufa? What does it mean? Um, so it means flattery or like kissing up. So strange that that we'll say that because of flattery, the base of Mikdash was destroyed. So what's that about? So he writes, Asr lihis chanef l'rishaim. It is a prohibition that you should not fawn, kiss up. Um, it's hard to have an exact English definition of that word, chanufa. But it says it's prohibition to do that, to either fawn or kiss up to risham, to evil people. Kafi shalamanu chazal mi pasuk v'lo sachanivu es haaretz. So Chazal learned it out from a pasuk in Bamidbar, not to do flattery. It says mashmos mitzvah. The meaning is Torah madricha utanu shelo lahaskim im mitzius harasha ba'olam. He says the prohibition is from the Torah is that we shouldn't agree, and even just agreeing to wickedness that exists in this world is not correct. Kishef shar when it's possible nitztamnu lahochiach es hachota shenemar hochiach tochiach zamisecha. So like we described, like we spoke about last week, that anytime you can rebuke, so we are supposed to rebuke and you should not flatter. Because and let's say you're in a situation where it just doesn't make sense or it's not possible to rebuke someone. Kirak nezek yitzmach me'atocha, or the only thing that's going to come out of you giving someone a rebuke is more damage, more feelings will get hurt. And there's not going to be anything productive. So nitztabnu chol hapachos shelo lechazek es harasha b'divrei shevach v'chanufa. So at the very least, though, we shouldn't strengthen the evilness that is going on with by praising it. Sharei kol amachanif la rasha, anyone who praises, flatters um, a wicked person, machziko modedo lamshich bidrachav. What you're doing is you're supporting him, you're strengthening him so that he should keep going in his wicked ways. V'nimtza shenase shutaf bechizuk hara ba'olam. So what you're doing is you're actually becoming a partner in this wickedness that's happening in this world. Um, V'zehu shene'emar, this is based on the pasuk, Matzik Rasha Marshia Tzadik Tovas Hashem Gam Shneim. Gam Shemru Chazal, and so Chazal, they tell us, quotes the Gemara in Sota, Shen Onsho Shela Machanif LaRasha Shenofa B'Gehenim, that one who flatters, one who praises this wicked person, he's going to fall to Gehenim. Afil Ubrim Shebemei Imam Mekalim, so even fetuses in the mother's womb, they curse this person, Ulasof Yipol, who Ozaro Biado Shalo Sarash Shiachsik Bichanufor. So, and what's going to happen is that a person who praises, who flatters this wicked person, so he says that he's going to fall, his descendants are going to fall. Um, Yes. ואפילו אם אינו משבח את מעשים הרעים שעשה. He says, let's say you're not, he says, okay, maybe you're not going to actually praise the bad things that he's doing. אלא שרק מכבדו ומשבח את כלל אישיו. So maybe you're just going to praise or honor this person's personality over al Isra Khanifa. Even that, you have violated this prohibition. שכן גם אם הוא רוצה לשבח דבר טוב שעשה, חוב עליו להסיר גם ממעשיו הרעים, כדי שלא ילמד הציבור ללכת בדרכיו. He says, if you want to mention something which this person did, which was good. So what you have to do is also mention the bad things, which are known. So the person, so you don't people don't start thinking that you're praising everything about this person. Right? If you have a person, an evil person who does many, many evil things, he happened to do one good thing. So he writes, he's quoting from the Shari Tshuva, he writes that, you know, you should mention that, this person is an evil person, and most of the things he does I don't agree with happens to be he did something correct. That's what he says is the proper way to do it. V'chein ne'emar ozvei Torah yahalu rasha. Those who leave Torah, the pasuk writes in Mishlei, those who leave Torah, they praise wickedness. Um, he says, "Ba'afil b'makom she'im biyad limchos." You go into medubar b'melech osar shelo yishmalo. He says, let's say, like even in a place where there's nothing that will come out of you protesting, like it's talking about a king or officer, someone in high position, right? Who there's no way they would listen to you if you try to rebuke them. L'chol hapachos lo yichanif lo lamaros yanimu shebadavar. At the very least, you should not flatter this person. Um, Despite any unpleasantness that comes. V'chein misupar b'Talmud. So he relates a story that the Gemara tells us. The Gemara tells a story in Sota, 41. Al Agrippus HaMelech shaya mizer goyim u'malach shelo kedin. So he says Agrippus HaMelech, who is the king, but he didn't come from Jewish. He was not he didn't come from Jewish blood, but he was king over the Jews. And so he took the kingdom, but it was not appropriate. Param shikar b'torah behakel. Higiel pasuk lo tuchal lasis alecha ish nachri. So he one time they were reading in Hakel. Hakel is when they gather up all the Jews, right, and the king would read from the Torah. That was happening. So Agrippus was reading from the Torah, and he read the pasuk that says that you can't make a non-Jew um, be the king over the Jews. Um, so the Gemara tells that's what happened. And Zalgu Einav the most. At that point, Agrippus's his eyes started filling with tears. Shade star mipnei shal pi haTorah ina ra'li yismelach. So um, he realized, that according to the Torah, I can't be the king. He got so upset. Um, so what happened? Hakel harav she'amad sham hitragesh mitmosav shel Agrippa makom lishtok haru lo v'amru achinu ata. So the crowd who were Jewish people, instead of not even saying anything, they just felt so bad because Agrippa was crying, and they said, "No, no, you really are a brother. You are a brother." Meaning they were flattering him inappropriately when they should have, at the very least, said nothing. So because of this, the Gemara says that Bnei Israel, the Jews, they were punished because of this. וצריך האדם להיות מוכן להפסיד מעמד או ממונו בלבד שלא יחניף האדם שאינו ראוי לכבוד. He says a person, quotes from the Chart Juva, a person needs to be prepared to lose his position, to lose money, as instead of flattering someone inappropriately. V'b'makom sakanas nefashos mutar lischanif. He says the Gemara says from Tosfos says in Sota there that um, if you need to if it's a time of uh, sakanas nefashos, meaning you're worried for your life, so then it actually might be permitted to flatter. V'zeh shasa Yaakov Avinu shamar lavadav kos amru ladonei Esav. V'achar kach amar le'Esav reisi panach yiros pnei Elokim v'atirtzeni. So he says that this is actually what Yaakov Avinu did. That Yaakov, when he met up with Esav, when he was afraid for his life, so he said, "Go say to my master, say to Esav." And he said to Esav himself, "I see your face like the face of Hashem." So how is he doing that? It sounds like this like false flattery to Esav. After Lahasper, she explains, "Kasher adam mitzchanev kidei lishmar al nafsho." So when a person is just flattering because he needs to save his life, ein chashash sheyachshavu shu tomich b'masav shel rasha. We don't think that this person is really supporting the evilness. Ela kol yodim shebeleis breira hu mitzchanev. We know that the only reason he's flattering is because he has no other choice and he just wants to survive. Ela shagam lachanufa beheter, but he says very powerfully that even if that's true, that you can that it is permitted to flatter in that way when you're afraid for your life. Yesh machir. So there's a price to this. B'zeh shamru Chazal tell us, Shekol hashvatim she'ishtatvu b'ashach aviyah le'esav lo zachu she'ibn beis hamikdash v'chalkam. So all the shvatim, what happened with Yaakov and Esav is Yaakov lined up all his kids that were there at the time, and they all bowed down to Esav. So all of them, except for one. V'rak Binyamin shelo yishtach Esav, except for Binyamin. Binyamin did not bow down to Esav because he wasn't there. So he says, because of this, all the Shvatim, they did not merit to have the base of Mikdash in their portion. It was only Binyamin who didn't bow to Esav, who he was the one who merited to have the base of Mikdash in his portion. So this just shows you the power of flattery that the Shvatim they didn't do anything wrong. This was the proper action during that time. But at the end of the day, this is a very powerful theme. Sometimes you'll see that at the end of the day, actions have consequences, even if what you're doing is correct. So there's a consequence to flattery, even flattery, this chanufa. I'm saying flattery, but it's chanufa. It's hard to translate that there's a consequence to doing it, even if it's really what is appropriate at that time. And that's why Binyamin was the only one who merited to have the base of Mikdash in his um in his tribe, in his part. Um yeah, and this is a hard one also, Hanufa, because it seems like something which could be so innocent when you're talking to people and you're just sort of agreeing and saying, you know, you don't want to get involved and tell them they're wrong, but it's something you need to think about also, that there are times that are appropriate to at least at the very least not have a reaction which shows you're agreeing. Um, at the very least, sometimes you can do that. Okay, so then we get back to this issue of machlokes, which is, you know, which is when we are fighting with other people. So writes Amru Chachamim kol machlik b'machlokes over belav. This is the theme we've talked about earlier about machlokes, fighting with other people, and I think the reason why we mentioned it a couple times is because machlokes, fights with other people, can be super damaging. And that alone, if we work on that alone, that is enough of that would be a big deal if we were able to correct that. So he says, Isra machlokes, Chachamim say, Kol machlik b'machlokes over belav. Anyone who upholds a machlokes, he violates a a negative commandment. Shemar lo yek korach b'chada. So the pasuk says, don't be like Korach. Don't hold on to machlokes. Bar shekol sinav ben yudim asura. He says what's clear. Obviously, hatred between Jews is not allowed. Imeduber machlokes hare she'isur chamer yoser. If you're talking about someone, if you're talking about a machlokes, a real fight, that's even more of um, a stringent a violation. מפני שלא מדובר בריב רגיל שבין אנשים שנמשך זמן קצר, אלא בהתמסרות קבועה של אנשים לשנוא לזכות עם אחיהם. So what we're talking about is not just like a regular quarrel, a regular argument that happens between people. Sometimes that happens. Okay, people argue sometimes. He's talking about like a long-lasting fight. You hear some people terrible stories about people who've been in fights for years, haven't spoken in years. So that's what the Chachamim said. But kol machzik b'machlokes, anyone who holds on to a fight, is in violation of this law. B'ima machlokes mechavenes keneged talmid chacham hagon chumrasa Rabbi Yoser. He says if the machlokes is directed towards a talmid chacham, that's even more stringent. We place machlokes zu gam kavod Torah mitzvah. He says, but when you have that machlokes, you're not only degrading yourselves, but even the honor of the Torah is being degraded. Machlokes u'geremes lihisrachos hatzibur milima the Torah v'kima mitzvos. And this machlokes actually causes people to distance themselves from Torah, from doing mitzvos. V'kal v'chomer kasher machlokes he shall tamen chacham. Shehi shall tamen keneged rabba muvak. And even more when this is a fight between a teacher and a student. He said, and he explains, "V'lachem machlokes korach v'adaso aisa chamura kol kach, she keneged, shehi kavana keneged Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabban Shekol Yisrael, shaya inyan mikol adam." So he says, and that's why the machlokes between Korach was the worst, was very bad because it was direct against Moshe, um, and that's why the Chachamim write, and Shulchan Aruch says that anyone who argues against his Rav, against his teacher, is like someone who's arguing with the Shekhinah. Um, yeah, he says, but sometimes, omnam yesh machlokes chiyuvi, sometimes there's a machlokes which is actually positive, machlokes below sin ishi, without personal hatred. That's a machlokes like Shammai and Hillel. And he says, with a machlokes like that, right? A machlokes is how we learn. We learn Gemara with a machlokes, right? We're talking with the chavrusa, we're yelling at them, but that's a machlokes which is good because that machlokes makes it more clear for us. We're able to clarify things, and that has a value to that. And so that's why the Chachamim say, this is in Pirkei Avos, Pirkei, that in machlokas like that, that's going to be sofa liskayim, um, meaning it's gonna outlast because both sides we're gonna see that both of the sides they're gonna have value in what they're saying and they're gonna make things more clear. But a machlokas which is not directed toward the sake of heaven, that's not going to last, and those who are involved are going to be destroyed from the world like Korach. Yeah, and he points out also that he says Shalom v'achdu mivatim be'ofen mamashi as emunah b'Hashem echad. He says that really peace and unity is an expression of faith in the unity of Hashem. Right, this is like the example that he gave above, right? That if we view ourselves as all of Bnei Israel, all the Jews as one body, it doesn't make sense for the hand to get upset at the foot when the foot trips and causes the hand to trip and get a scab. Right? So by having peace and oneness, it's an expression that we all believe in one thing, we all believe in God, and that we're all together. He says, "B'miuchad am Yisrael shenivra k'dei legalus es davar Hashem v'olam tzarich lios ba'achdus, shemo she'Hashem echad kach am Yisrael tzarich lios echad." He says, in particular, Am Yisrael, who were created in order to reveal um, the words of Hashem in this world, they need to be together. So just like Hashem is one, so too Yisrael needs to be one. And therefore, he writes, when Am Yisrael are be'achdus, when we're together, when we're united, miskala gdulaso v'oivav noflim lefanav, so we revealed how great we are, and our enemies fall in front of us, because inu be'achdus, no falif ne'oivav. But when we're not united, we fall, Rahman to our enemies. Um, but he just writes, but when it's talking about Rishalayim, who already separated themselves from Hashem, from the nation, um, so then fighting machlokes with them is not creating more of a separation because they already separated themselves. And then he writes that that's why we actually need to לחלוק עליהם, מפני שעל ידי מחלוקת נגדם מפרידים את היסוד המפואר ומונעים ממנו להמשיך לקלל. So there are some times when it's involved with wicked people that actually makes sense to have machlokes with them because they've already separated themselves and keeping troublemakers around sometimes just creates more machlokes. Okay, so I just want to this will be our last topic. I want to close with this because this one I think is very powerful. So we'll stop with machlokes, and then we're going to talk about midas stom. This is one of my favorite ones. I remember the first time I learned about midas stom. It's my first year in YU. I was in Rabbi Weider's class, and yeah, it made an impression. So Amru Chachamim. He writes that our sages tell us, Kofim al midastom. What does that mean? It means we force midastom. What does that mean? What's midastom? So he explains, Kofin Adam shalo yinai keminag anshe stom. We force a person so he doesn't behave as the people of Stone behaved. Okay, how do the people of Stone behave? What was so bad about them? Umahi midas anshe stom. What does it mean, midas anshe stom? It's she'inim rotzim latei lacherim lahanos. It's they don't want other people to get any benefit. Ve'af b'makom shehanas adam acher eno goremes lahem shum nezek. And even when by letting other people benefit, it doesn't cause them any damage. Ela zenev v'zelo chaser. Rather, one person is benefiting, the other person isn't losing anything. Alpha PK mutter sorry, Alpha Pekin, mitoch ra libam inim rotzim laniach lachim lenos. Even still, they because of this evil trait in their heart, they don't want to let anyone else benefit. Kain amru chachamim kofil midastom. We force midastom. Hainu shemechayim adim latil lachim lenos midvarim sheshayachim lo kasherin lo mizeh have said. So we force somebody to let others benefit when it doesn't cause us any damage. We'll explain in a second says Anshe Stom Lora to Latilachirim Lanos Mirtam Sham, the people of Stom, they didn't want anyone to benefit from their land, their properties. Ve'afapi Shaita Lahem Eretz Tova, Kigan Hashem Leakol Tova, you Ashrim Gdolim, Bimayu Ovrim Orchim Banim Bartzam Lo Yam Aksim Klum Lora to Shevo Anim Shegur Benem Kidish Leanu Meratam Tova. So he writes that even though these people of Stom, they had a beautiful land, it was like a garden of Hashem, that's what the Pasuk says, and it was filled with all this good, and they were super wealthy. Um, and if some poor people would come and get some stuff from them, they wouldn't have lost anything. So, nevertheless, they didn't want any poor people to come and live with them because they didn't want anyone to benefit from their land. Um, so what does it mean, these people of stone? These people of stone is that they don't want anyone to benefit at all, even if it doesn't cause us a loss to them. For example, and he'll give another example. But some people say that this example, you could argue on the example, but some people say this is example, which would be meat of a stone. So let's say someone is driving somewhere. They know they have to go on a drive. They have to get to a wedding, which is an hour away, and someone else wants to come with them, right? So the person who's driving has to drive there anyways. The person who needs to get there, so he needs a way of getting there. So if the driver says, "I refuse to take somebody, I refuse to take you, unless you pay me," for example. So maybe that's an act of stone because what's the driver? The driver isn't losing anything by having to take somebody, and the passenger he needs to get there. So you could argue and then say no, the driver really is losing something. He's losing his time, he's losing his face. But that is potentially an example. But then he quotes a Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, and this is a Mishnah that we'll spend some time on next few minutes. That the Mishnah says this: Homer Shali, Shali, Vishalach, Shalach. So if I say, we're in four examples, right? The one who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, right? What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. So the Mishnah writes, Zu Mida Bedanis, that is the middle category. Um, Skip a little bit. The one who says Shali, Shalach, Vishalach, Shali. If I say what's yours is mine, right? Sorry, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, right? Just flipping them. So it says the Amaret. That person doesn't really know how to learn, doesn't really know stuff. Shali, Shalach, Vishalach, Shalach. If I say what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, so you're a chassid. And if I say Shali, Shali, Vishalach Shali, if I say what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, so that's called a Rasha. That's called a wicked person. So I skipped a line. In one of these four examples, the Mishnah writes it's Midas Stone. So you would think that Midas Stone would be the worst of the worst, right? What would we think Midas Stone would be? You would think it means the person who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, right? Who takes everything. But that's not what the Mishnah says is Midas Stone. The Mishnah says what's Midas Stone is the one who says that what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. I don't want what's yours. Yet the Mishnah still tells us that that's called Midas Stone. So why is that called Midas Stone? So he explains, says he says that the one who says Shali Shali v'Shalach Shalach, um, he says he's not yet sinning in Midas Dom. He says Mikoma Koma Yedei Umda Kazu Krova Legiela Midas Dom. He says by having that mentality, by saying what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, right? He says that's coming close to the meat of stone. He says, "Ki be'etzem ikar kavanaso shelo yitzarech lati ledavar lachaveru." He says, what my intent is that I'll never need to give anything to you, and you'll never need to give anything to me. And by just separating ourselves, um, this, we we will never need each other, right? We won't need to give to other people. That's what Minas Dom is. The Tiferes Yisrael writes over there. He says that this Minas Dom, even though it's kind of close to like Ve'ahavta Re'acha Kamocha, because you're viewing your friend as yourself, right? You're saying what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. Everyone gets what they get, what gets what they should get. So he says by having that mentality and not thinking about others, where nobody thinks about other people, everyone just thinks about themselves. He writes, "Tispat al ha'ava shebein adam lechavero." He says what's going to happen is you're going to totally rid the love get rid of the love that exists between a man and his friend. No one cares about their friend. Bistom, which is like stone. Shemanu regel orchim mibeneim. They totally they prevented any guest from coming to them. Right? They didn't want to care about other people. Even though they knew that that it could be that they could end up contributing also. So that's what Minasoma is where you only care about yourself. You don't care about the welfare of other people. Um, and even if you're not taking stuff from other people, but this lack of sensitivity to other people's needs is what Minasoma is. And he gives an example that the Gemara gives. Um, that it says kasher ba'im achim lachlo ksado sharish lahem aviyim. So when a person comes, let's say there are a bunch of brothers who come and they all get an inheritance and they get a bunch of lands from their father. V'la'achad mehem yesh sada b'tzad echad misadosav shel av im. So he says one of the brothers has a field that's close to all these different. It's close to one of these five fields. Let's say five brothers or six brothers. And six brothers, and has a field, one of them has a field that's close to field number six, right? So if all the fields are pretty much worth the same, so this brother who has a field close to field number six, so he can request that his field should be the field number six, so that way it's close by, right? It's helpful for him, so he doesn't need to have two fields in different places. He can just plow in one shot all of them. So he says if the brothers protest against this and just say, no, we don't want that. So that's Mina Stone because what loss do they have by giving him field number six? All of them are the same, right? They don't lose anything. That's this idea of Zennen and V'zelo Chaser, that one person's benefiting, the other person's not losing anything. And if you protest with this, that would be Midas Dome. Because again, that's just it's easy ways where you could care about the welfare of other people. You could care about and be sensitive to other people's needs. And a person who acts in a Midas Dome is a person who's not sensitive to that. And that's why the Chachamim say that Kofin al Midas Dome, that we force a person not to act in this way, we force a person to be sensitive to other people's needs, um, which is part of this theme of Ben Adam L'Chavero, which goes back to really the beginning. We were talking about Ve'ahavta Re'acha Kamocha, to love your neighbor like you love yourself, and to understand that in if you really loved him in this way, of course you would never protest something like this where the person could benefit, and it wouldn't cause any loss to you. So let's stop there. Everyone should have a beautiful Shavuos. I shall learn very well. And
Thank you.